A very good afternoon to everybody here. Thank you very much for being present today and a very warm welcome. Justice for Shonali Mukherjee and justice for Aarushi-Hemraj. These are the two cases on which we would like today's discussion to be on. It is absolutely shocking and horrific the way in which Shonali Mukherjee, a young 16-year-old college student, sociology student, was attacked with acid in the middle of the night when she was asleep because she had thwarted the sexual advances of the accused men. But what is even more shocking is the fact that today Shonali lives the life of a corpse, literally with no eyesight, a permanently disfigured face, with innumerous medical issues which she and her father do not have the money to address. And on the other hand, the perpetrators of this horrific crime roam around free on the streets because of their acquittal by the higher courts. Post Shonali Mukherjee case, acid attacks continue in our country with impunity. There are many, many more victims of such horrific crimes. The question here which we would like to raise is, will we ever learn from incidents and horrific cases like this, and what are the lessons to be learned? The second case is that of a 14-year-old Aarushi-Hemraj. She was the most loved and the only child of her parents, Rajesh and Nupur, and her brutal murder. The most senseless and baseless character assassination of this dead child by a negligent and bungling police, and on the other hand, an insensitive and sensationalist media, were potent enough to poison the minds of people across the country. The resultant conviction of the parents, Rajesh and Nupur, by the court without even a shred of evidence against them is certainly not acceptable. All this while the investigative agency suppressed crucial evidence which were pointing in another direction. What is perhaps the most important thing in any criminal jurisprudence is you have to follow due process. And if you don't, you will have the macabre fallout like we have seen in the Talwar case. The nightmarish way in which the lives of two innocent people has turned out, not because of the evidence against them, but because of sheer lack of evidence against them. And it is precisely this lack of evidence leading to their conviction which is really scary today. Is there any measure of investigative accountability which we can ask for? Was this a fair trial? Or was it a willful miscarriage of justice? Who pays for a colossal incompetence and prejudice? We are gathered here to look more closely at these and many more such questions. Because they are not one-off cases, they reflect on how our systems work, the way our police, our CBI function, the way the judiciary looks at evidence, and more importantly, the way the media relies on information fabricated and unsubstantiated to manipulate the minds of people. We hope to look for answers to these very real issues and a way forward. Please help me in welcoming our esteemed panelists for today's discussion. We have with us Justice S.N. Dhingra, retired Judge, Delhi High Court. Would you please like to come in? In March 2011, Justice S.N. Dhingra retired as a High Court judge. In his more than 2-decade-long career in the judicial service, he delivered several important judgments, including the one on Parliament attack and the Nitish Katara case. Delivering his farewell speech at the send-off function organized at the High Court, Justice Dhingra said he had never been the darling of the bar, as he had heard and delivered judgments keeping in mind justice to the litigants and not on the faces of lawyers appearing before the courts. Commenting on the quality of justice delivery system in the country, Justice Dhingra said, "We cannot say that ours is the best. A lot more requires to be done to come to the expectation of the common man." He is currently serving as a member of the Competition Commission of India. Thank you, sir. Shri N.K. Singh, ex-IPS officer. A former IPS officer, Shri N.K. Singh has had a long tenure with the CBI. His entire police career was very traumatic, but he stood his ground on principles and he was awarded with the Police Medal for Meritorious Service and the Residence Police Medal for Distinguished Service. In both his stints in the CBI, during which he acquired a reputation of a fearless officer with his record of handling sensitive cases and standing up to political pressures, including the arrest of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. He has also prosecuted Sanjay Gandhi and V.C. Shukla in the Kissa Pursila case. He retired from police service in 1996, and in the same year, he along with Prakash Singh, former DGP UP, filed a PIL in the Supreme Court of India, asking the courts to direct the centre and states to implement police reform directives of National Police Commission. Thank you, sir. Shri Sushil Bajaj. Sir. Shri Sushil Bajaj is an advocate who has practiced at the criminal bar for the last 31 years. He has been involved in a number of high-profile cases, from the Larkin spy trial in 1984 to the Shivani Patnagar murder trial, the Nitish Katara murder trial, and currently appearing in the 2G case. Thank you, sir. Shri Pratap Somwanshi. Pratap Somwanshi is the editor of Hindustan paper. He has a career which spans over 23 years in journalism, and he's written on various issues in social, cultural and rural issues. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Kavita Krishnan, social activist. Kavita is the secretary of All India Progressive Women's Association. That is a women's group which is especially active among women workers, agricultural workers, and sections of the poor, women, rural and urban areas. IPWA has a record of resistance against feudal violence on women and state repression against women. Kavita has also been a student activist where she's helped organize women students on many campuses to demand mechanisms against sexual harassment. Thank you for being here, Kavita. And last but not the least, Shoini Ghosh. Shoini is a professor at AJK Mass Communication Center, Jamia Millia Ismaila, New Delhi. She has directed a documentary, Tales of Nine Fairies, which is based on sex workers' rights movement. She is also the author of Fire, a queer classic. Shoini has been a visiting professor in a number of universities, within India and outside of India, and had a long association with Sexuality, Gender and Rights Institute. She writes on contemporary media, speech and censorship, popular cinema, documentary, and issues of gender and sexuality. Thank you, Shohini, for being here today with us. So let's flag off our discussion. We are very unfortunate that Shonali, we had expected Shonali Mukherjee to be with us today and to talk about her case and the trials and tribulations which she has faced and the struggle which she is currently going through against the state, where she is fighting for justice for herself and her perpetrators being put behind bars. Also, she is fighting for other victims of acid attack because she feels that this horrific practice must be discontinued and there has to be a much more severe punishment for perpetrators of this crime. So she has not been able to come with here, so unfortunate about that, but we'll be talking about her case. But before we start with our panelists, I'd like to invite Dr. Vandana Talwar, who's a family member of Aarushi Talwar family. And as a member of the family who's gone through this whole trial for the last 5 years and the impact it has had on them and the details of the case, I'd like her to come here and give us a brief review of the whole thing.
Thank you, Masuma. Good afternoon, everyone, respected panelists and my dear friends. I'm going to present some known and some not so known facts about the case today. 16th May 2008. I got up at the usual time in the morning at 6 a.m. to send my daughter to school, who was only 5 months older than Aarushi, on the last day before the vacations. Just a few minutes after waking her up, while I was in the washroom, I heard some wailing sounds coming from outside. Getting a little alarmed, I went out to see what had happened. I saw my husband was standing in the corridor, looking absolutely stunned. And with disbelief on his face and voice, all he said was that Aarushi's been murdered. After reassuring our children that Aarushi had been taken ill at night and we needed to go and see her, we left immediately for Noida, little realizing that this was going to be the first of a series of tragedies which were going to befall upon our family over the next few years. Suddenly our family was in the limelight, as the case was labelled as a high-profile case, perhaps because of our professional middle-class background, giving us no time to come to terms with the intensity of the double murder, as Hemraj's body was discovered on the terrace the very next day. Within the first week itself, we were exposed to a system which laid bare its inadequacies. Having had no previous exposure of the police or the media, we were shocked by their lack of professionalism. We were exposed to a complete lack of awareness by the police for even cordoning off a scene of crime, leave alone collection of material evidence, and to the media frenzy, which showed scant sensitivity to the enormous loss to the family, and the need for proper investigations, without dozens of people swarming into the house. Exactly a week later, on 23rd May, what happened was even more bizarre, and I remember breaking down completely when I heard a press conference being telecast on national television by none other than the rank of IG Police Meerut, who claimed that Rajesh was the murderer. He called Aarushi Shruti and talked of a relationship between her and Hemraj. Not known to us at that time, it was Krishna, Rajesh's dental assistant, who had fed the police with these lies. These irresponsible statements were without a shred of evidence, and even after a string of witnesses in the trial today, it has been completely disproved that Hemraj was murdered in the room of Aarushi. But these statements were lapped up by the media, who further added more spice, and over the next few months, many such made-up stories were telecast, resulting in the TRPs of the Aarushi case to be more than that of cricket channels in July 2008. Why was the terrace door not opened? For the simple reason that the police forgot to do so. Why was the house cleaned up after Aarushi's body was taken for cremation? For the simple reason that the police gave the family the permission to do so. Why did the family go the very next day to Hardwar? Because elders in the family said that a child's ashes should be immersed immediately, as early as possible. How come the parents didn't hear anything at night? CBI Joint Director Arun Kumar did a sound simulation test by switching on the ACs in both the rooms at night, and it was found that even loud noises in Arushi's room did not reach the parents' room. But was this ever highlighted by the media? No, never. There is no evidence of forcible entry. Correct. But what rules out a friendly entry? These simple truths were exaggerated and distorted and sold to the public. The damage caused by the inept handling by the police and the media was tremendous, and I strongly believe that the judgment which has come recently, these reasons are completely responsible for that. Rajesh was released after 2 months, since there was no evidence to suggest his involvement in the crime, and though the servants were arrested by the CBI, for reasons best known to them, they too were released, and the CBI team got changed after 1.5 years. Over the next 2 years, Rajesh and Nupur tried to move on by keeping themselves engrossed in their professional work, and they also started Aarushi's Legacy, an NGO, through which to provide medical help to the needy. Meanwhile, they cooperated in all earnestness with the new CBI team, whether it was to go to the office whenever they were called, or even to undergo the narco test, because they felt if this was required to prove their innocence, then so be it. They also wrote repeatedly to the CBI to get touch DNA done, as worldwide this test is now used in cases where no concrete evidence can be found. Therefore, they were again completely taken aback when the CBI filed a closure report in December 2010. But how could they accept a closure when their daughter's killers were roaming scot-free? They protested. But this was only a closure in disguise. The closure report had multiple insinuations, further damaging the reputations of Rajesh, Nupur and Aarushi, and many fabricated new theories, which were non-existent at the time of UP police and first CBI teams. Surprisingly, the servants were given a clean sheet without being interrogated, as per record. Then came another blow. Despite there being critical gaps in investigation, because of which a closure had been filed, Rajesh and Nupur were both summoned for trial. An appeal was filed against the summoning order in Allahabad High Court. While going through the papers, which were given at the time of summons, Dr. Dinesh Talwar traced a sequence which clearly showed that Krishna, who was a one-time suspect, on his pillow cover, there was Hemraj's blood. One of the victims' blood was there on his pillow cover. Well, being completely naive, we thought, wow, now the case is solved. What more is required? So convinced was Dinesh that he messaged our lawyer Rebecca the moment he found this in the middle of the night, lest something happened to him at night and this vital information remain unknown. But what did the CBI do? The CBI conveniently got a document, supposedly from CDFT. It was unnamed and unstamped, saying that a typographical error had occurred. A typo error? 2.5 years after the report, which was lying with the CBI since November 2008, and yet they had not mentioned it in the closure report. The trial started in June 2012. It was to be on fast track, and hearings were kept at 3 to 4 times a week. Barely able to keep up with the defense, it seemed that speed was more important than justice. At this time, we were told that the trial would definitely end in a conviction, as this is a widely publicized, high-profile case. But why, we asked. In fact, the trial would bring out all the facts of the case, and they anyway clearly show that Rajesh and Nupur are innocent, and there is the involvement of someone else in the crime. but the CBI deliberately hid all those facts from the court and manipulated and fabricated others with the intention to win their case. The truth be damned. In this scenario, could one have even hoped for a fair trial or an unbiased decision by the judiciary? The last few years have been emotionally, professionally, socially, and financially draining. What happened in 2008 was an enormous tragedy. But the aftermath of that tragedy has been so immense and so intense that if ever the truth is revealed one day, this case will go down in the legal and journalistic history as one of the gravest miscarriages of justice to ever have happened. Even more scary is the fact that the law enforcement agencies can actually turn around and victimize the victims to such an extent that they actually let the criminals go off. And that is the society we are living in today, where people are willing to believe that in a normal, loving family, parents can one day turn around and kill their child without any reason. I wonder what story the investigators would have made up had Aarushi been a boy. It seems imperative, therefore, to maintain some accountability of the police, the judiciary, and the media, along with the need for reforms in all these areas to ensure that our society does not create yet another Aarushi Talwar. Thank you.
Before we start, I just want a small announcement. Can everybody please put your phones in silent mode or switched off? It will help us hear the speakers better. Thank you. I now would call upon Justice Devra to speak, and we are running short of time, so I think 10 minutes is a good enough time for everybody. 10 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My throat is bad. I won't be able to speak more than 10 minutes for that reason also. But in any case, you see, there are not one Aarushi in India. Not one victim of this system. In fact, we all are responsible for this system. The first thing I want to ask all of you is, have you leave aside Aarushi case? Don't consider, keep Aarushi case in mind. Have you heard of parents killing children? There have been, at least in each session year cases, court in India, at least 2 to 3 cases where parents have killed their children. Honor killing is a known fact in India. And in some of the societies, parents do kill children for certain reasons. And children also kill parents. It's not that children don't kill parents. Children kill parents for property. Children kill parents for in some anger. I don't know whether you know it or not. There have been many cases where children have killed parents and mother herself has killed her own children, young children. I don't know whether you know it or not. I was in session there. A mother killed her 2 young children aged 4 and 5, or 5 and 6, as she wanted to get rid of them so that she can marry again. This was also a widely reported case in media. Maybe none of you knows it. But there have been cases where the parents have killed children, children have killed parents. So don't consider any case from the angle that whether parents can kill children whom they love, or the children can kill parents whom they love. Once you take out this prejudice which is there in your mind. In our society, parents, children, both can kill you. There is no such sacrosanct that parents don't kill children or children don't kill parents. I'm not talking of Aarushi case. So this is this. If you wipe out this and then consider the things impassionately, perhaps you may be able to think in a better, rational manner. See, I remember of this story when this was when I was 6th, 7th class. It was in our course. Meena kahan hai? Now, Meena was daughter of a loving father. He loved his daughter very much. And he lodged a report that my daughter has disappeared. Now, once daughter disappeared, the police was searching for his daughter because police knew he loves his daughter very much. And the police was constantly keeping watch on him also. Police found that there was a spot where he repeatedly used to go and weep. Ultimately, police found the body of the daughter in that pit where he used to go and weep. And when the body was recovered, it was found that he, in fit of anger, had killed his own daughter and then put her in. So these kinds of incidents do happen in every society. So we should not consider incidents from the angle that, oh, how did this happen? Things do happen. I will not go into merits or demerits of the conviction because the appeal is already pending. The Tagwar couple. You see, our judicial system and our media, see, both lack sensitiveness. In judicial system, I consider judicial system which results into trial and ultimate giving of justice. We have three parts. First, investigation. Second, prosecution before the courts. And third, you have adjudication, which is done by judge. You see, as far as from media reports I know, the parents were having best legal help available to them. They could afford, which a normal poor man cannot afford. You see, think of those people who cannot afford even legal and still are fighting cases before this insensitive system. See, I remember of a case, I wrote the name, one Rampal. Some theft took place in his house. He went to police station, lodged report of theft. He had a doubt on one of his, he was a mystery, a small kind of contractor. And he told, I have doubt on that. So police asked him to take him to his house. He spent entire money on taking police to the house because police normally doesn't spend money. Mr. Singh will confirm it. That you see, police people are not given money for traveling here and there for purpose of investigation. Many police stations do not have stationery. They take even buy station. You see, take stationery from after taking money from the accused. And thereafter, you see, their things were recovered. Whatever was stolen was recovered. Lists were prepared of things recovered and everything was done. And the man, to his surprise, finds that in the final report, the police has said nothing was recovered. And filed a criminal. Now this man had, after coming from that place, asked that man to give a photocopy of things recovered and memos prepared. Photocopy was given to him by the IU. Now he was having those photocopies, so he filed a report before Commissioner of Police that I had accompanied, this is the recovery memo. My all things were recovered. How is Now police is saying nothing was recovered and you see, police took offense of his filing complaint to the Commissioner of Police. It is the case of Sangamware Police Station. That man was, you see, implicated in 7 more cases, including rape case. Rape case of child of 11 years, girl of 11 years. You see, perchance, because some cases were serious, I was the session judge. So I did investigate, see, cross-examination also and everything. I found he is being implicated one after another. He is never being allowed to come out of jail. And one after another, 7 cases. See, I condemned the police. I wrote letters to the Commissioner of Police in my judgment, also ordered that you do investigation against these police people. And see, ultimately, after 7 or 8 cases, he got rid of those cases also in police, and he was granted by High Court a compensation of 3-4 lakhs. But what is this compensation of 3-4 lakhs? If your 10 or 12 years of life are spent in jail and your whole life. So what I want to tell you is that the whole system, which is our own creation, minded, we blame police time and again. How many of you don't go and approach the influential people for getting admission of your child into schools? How many? Maybe. I'm not saying, there are exceptions. That's why I say how many.
That's why I raised my hand.
But there are people, those who they at first instance go and exercise their influence for smaller words. And with this, we have created a society where we think that unless we exercise influence, unless we approach someone, we cannot get justice. And once we have created this society, where we have put everything on sale, investigation, fair investigation means investigation to what I want. No, it can't be. Fair investigation is to be tested by the judge, not by I, me or you. Similarly, what is fair trial? You have got a trial. Then the lower court can go wrong. It is not. Our system provides that yes, lower court can go wrong. That is why there is High Court. And if High Court can also go wrong, it is Supreme Court. So if you say, I don't trust the whole system, all right, this is my system, your system, it is your country, don't trust it. So, see, this system is our creation. Sorry, time is up. But this we have to bear with this system so long as we unitedly don't change this system. And how to change? It is not, you see, by one day or one moment task. It needs, everybody has to pay cost, everybody has to pay price for changing the system. And unless you are prepared to pay the price for changing the system, we cannot change it by lectures. I've been giving these lectures for 60 years. And these lectures I have been also, you see, that's why I don't go much for giving lectures, because I feel that, you see, this wastage of time and effort. We are lecturing and with no result. Everybody, most corrupt persons in this country lectures of honesty. This is the country. And we hear it. I clap also.
We are here not to give lectures or to hear lectures. The idea behind all of us removing time out of our very busy schedule, we're all working people here, is to come here to talk about cases which are important, cases which are not one-off cases, which could apply to anybody. And we are here because We want to change this system we are talking about. We are a democracy. We believe that we are in a democracy and we have a right to speak. So this is not about giving lectures. This is a platform which we wanted to create in which we express our views. We express about injustice happening at the level of the state machinery, at the level of judicial systems, at the level of investigative systems, which are big, which are huge, which are powerful, which are beyond the realm of a common man. And individually a common man cannot change the systems. And this was one step towards creating such a platform. So I think that is the spirit behind this meeting. I would like to now call upon Shri N.K. Singh to speak. Sir, 10 minutes. Can we have the volume a little up?
Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Two cases have been discussed, I should say, the one Aarushi case in detail, the other briefly. Well, as Justice rightly said, there are hundreds and hundreds of cases, and many cases like the ones two cases. Now, as far as Sonali case is concerned, frankly speaking, I have not heard much about this case. But the brief note which has been given to me by the organizer, as a policeman, ex-policeman, I can say that as far as this case is concerned, I think the policeman has did the fairly good job, in the sense that the accused were caught, they were prosecuted, and they were awarded a sentence of 9 years each, if I am correct, 9 years each. Now, later on they went to, I don't think they have been acquitted, they have been released on bail. So they were granted bail by High Court. Well, as a former police officer or a former CBI officer, I can tell you, there are many cases, when as investigating officer we felt that the accused should not have been granted bail. Because we know of many cases when accused persons hardened criminals, while on bail, have committed another serious or many other cases. But that is part of the system, as I will agree with Justice Dhingra, that system needs to be changed. Now, as far as this Aarushi case, well, certainly most unfortunate, tragic case it was, and because I stay in Delhi and it happened very close to Noida, almost last society before Noida. So we all, like most of us here, but whatever details we know, we mostly know from newspapers or through media. Without going into details, I was also watching very closely the progress of the investigation. And at times, as a citizen, and of course as a former police officer, CBI officer, I did feel that the UP police, this would not have been hurried to hold a press conference in such a sensitive matter case. But it was rather, I can say, it was rather held hurriedly. A very senior officer, it was mentioned, and certain things were said. It perhaps could have been avoided without doing justice to the investigation and detection of the case. Well, as we all know, later on the case was transferred to CBI, and I'm very proud of CBI. And I enjoy every minute of working in CBI. I have all sorts of experiences, excitement, depression, punishment, etc. But still, I'm proud, still proud of having worked with the CBI. And the case was taken up by CBI, and the officer in charge, joint director in charge, is admittedly an efficient officer. Now he's in UP police, and we hear about him even these days. Well, they went wrong. According to their own versions, the two versions came out. So the first team, it appears, as the case was put up in the court of law, they went the wrong way. And then the case was sort of reinvestigated by another team. And they came to certain conclusions, entirely different. The first team never, not even remotely suspected or found that the parents were responsible. But the second team, the entire investigation, it went in the direction of suspecting the parents, and ultimately, as we all know, and the family members must be knowing much more, that the CBI final report, as we say it, the report on the result of investigation, which is presented in the court of law. And surprisingly, CBI did not make any recommendation. Normally, another former CBI officer once in, we have worked together. Welcome. Now, a police or the CBI or the investigating agency, after investigation, it is expected and supposed to come to a conclusion, its own conclusion. But in this case, they submitted a report, if I am right, saying these are the facts of the case, we leave it to the court to decide. Am I correct? I think this is what it said.
Yes, sir, the evidence is insufficient.
Evidence. But look, it's a strange way things went. I am not casting any aspersion on the judgment of the court. I am not going into the matter at all. And the court, after going through the final report of the CBI, felt, yes, there was a prima facie evidence to proceed to put the parents of Aarushi under trial. The case was tried, we are all watching. There can be opinions, there can be feelings. The feelings of some members might have been hurt very badly. But the fact remains the case was being tried, as he rightly said. We have a system. It was following a system. The court was there, it was trying the case. And the accused has a chance to always the opportunity to go to the higher court. And as we all know, the defense several times went to Allahabad High Court, and then also they went to several matters that these witnesses should examine this, that, we don't want to go. And ultimately the case ended in conviction. Now many points can there be in the minds of family members and the defense that it was a wrong conviction. We may hold our different opinions, but I am afraid under our system, and we have to follow a system, this matter has to be ultimately determined by High Court where the matter appeal has been admitted, if I know. And then ultimately you have to go to Supreme Court. So, pardon?
2 more minutes.
For 2 more minutes. Oh my God. Well, I am at the receiving end. Please, CBI, you have to give a little more time. Okay, well, I will not some time. So as far as the cases are concerned, I thought I can speak only this much as far as these 2 cases which were dismissed and details were presented. Now, Justice Ringa spoke about the system. That is the main thing. If we feel that people generally are unhappy, I am talking from police angle, not from the angle of judiciary or media. They are there, they will take care of their media. But I am talking of police or CBI. Particularly about police, I know that people are generally unhappy with police. They are critical of police. They condemn police. They come on the street. We have seen the dharnas, etc. recently. Much of that is justified. But very few of us pause and think that 64 years after establishment of democracy here in this country, and democracy means what? Just a thing, you will bear me out. Just democracy means rule of law. Rule of law means determined by court of law, interpreted by court of law. Democracy also means police, in its crime and investigation work, is responsible to law and the people, not the government of the day. But what is the truth? What is the reality? Ladies and gentlemen, after 64 years of struggle of democracy, we have had no police reform whatsoever was the name. She was kind enough to mention, while introducing me, about a writ that we filed in the Supreme Court, two of us, myself and Mr. Prakash Singh. Because we are still, I'll take only 2-3 minutes ago, because that is maybe of little. Still after 64 years of establishment, we are still functioning under Police Act of 1861, given to us by Britishers. So we want a good, efficient police force in the country under an act which was given by colonial power. Is it possible? It is not possible. Impossible. Why is it continuing? Because those who can change it, they have got vested into the system. That 1861 Police Act vested the superintendence to the state government. And what is superintendent not defined. So it has given them enormous. So what has ultimately resulted? The police or the CBI which to be responsible to law and the people and the court of law investigation and crime work is not being allowed to do so. And they very often act at the whims and caprices of the government of the day. And so there has been no police reform, so two of us, so emergency saw the nadir of all that, police excesses, police misuse. And the victims were Moraj Desai, Chandrasekhar, Chaudhary Charan Singh. So first thing they did, they instituted a police commission under Dharamvila. It produced a first-class police commission report for police reforms, which would be in tune with the democratic system. It was gathering dust. Two of us filed writ. The Supreme Court took a decade to pass directives for police reform. And if you see the 7 main directions of the police for the Supreme Court on police reform, and these are implemented. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you we have less time. Most of the problems that we face today or we hear today can be sorted out. Of course, humanly, after all, there will always be faults, deficiencies, and excesses in anything which is sort of operated with. This much, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Systems are made for things to function in a proper manner. One of the basic issues which we've been trying to raise to this platform and through all other platforms which we've created is, was the due process of law followed? There is an investigation which happens. Now, if there is incompetence on the part of the investigative agency, who pays the price for it? What is the safeguard of a common man against the incompetency of an investigative agency? This is a question I think which we need to answer. I would like Shri Sushil Bajaj to come and speak.
Ladies and gentlemen, unlike the previous 2 speakers, I am a man of no eminence. But I have been a practicing lawyer for 31 years. The law has been my life, it has been my religion, And I stand here and say before you today that the Aarushi-Hemraj case raises very serious questions about the administration of justice in this country. Mr. Singh said, democracy means the rule of law, and the rule of law means letting the courts determine. And we do. We trust in the courts. And the question before us today is, have we been served well by those courts over the last few years?
No.
This case, the Aarushi-Hemraj case, started with speculation, started with unfounded rumors. And those rumors became the narrative of this case. There was prejudice everywhere. And that prejudice continued from the beginning right till the very day that the convictions were recorded in this case. And the tragedy is this, and Justice Dhingra alluded to this. The tragedy is this, that everything that the Talwars did was evidence in the public eye of their guilt. The fact that they had good lawyers was evidence of their guilt. It's a separate matter that most of those lawyers charged the Talwars nothing.
Correct.
They appeared for free. The fact that those lawyers advised the Talwars to approach the courts for a redressal of their grievances was further evidence of their guilt. And the question before us is this: when the public was being fed these rumors, these canards, by an irresponsible media, the public was entitled to make a view of their own. It was their prerogative to have a view. To an extent, perhaps it was the prerogative of the police to behave in the way they behaved. But was it the prerogative of the court not to set all of these issues aside and rely only on the evidence? Ask the question, where is the evidence? Why were X, Y, or Z not investigated? And when I look at the judgment, I see not a judgment in law. I see a judge declaring a legacy document. He was retiring the next day. He prepared a document that he hoped would be published and that would let him be remembered by generations to come. I mean, it is churlish almost to take stylistic objections to a judgment. But what is the object of writing a judgment that the average person can't even begin to understand? I think my English is fairly adequate. And I read this judgment. When I read it, I had to pick up the dictionary 20 times. I take the liberty of reading just the very first paragraph of this judgment. The cynosure of judicial determination is the fluctuating fortunes of the dentist couple, Dr. Rajesh Talwar and Dr. Nupur Talwar, who have been arraigned for committing and secreting, as also deracinating the evidence of commission of the murder of their own adolescent daughter, a butte damsel and sole heiress, Miss Aarushi, and hapless domestic aide Hemraj, who had migrated to India from neighboring Nepal to eke out living and attended routinely to the chores of domestic drudgery at the house of their masters. And this judgment is replete with this manner of observation.
Correct.
It is not a judgment of law. Of course, I believe in the system, so I believe that this injustice will be undone by the appellate courts. But it should never have come to this pass. And the question before us today, the topic actually that was sent to me was Indian judiciary, reality check, and need for reform. And I agreed to be here today, one, because I believe a grave injustice had been done, but also because I was told that there would be an opportunity to hear Justice Dhingra, an eminent judge, and perhaps get his perspective on the lawyer's perspective, that over the past few years, for better or for worse, judges have taken the position that they will substitute for poor investigations and inadequate evidence by righting the wrongs of society and convicting people whether there is evidence or not. And I see this every day. Ours is an adversarial system. In an adversarial system, the prosecution puts up its case, the defense challenges that case, and judges determine based on the evidence. That's the system we adopted. It may not be the best in the world, but that's the system we have. And did the trial judge in this case do that? The evidence, the judgment certainly indicates that much was left wanting. We spoke about the narrative of this case. We spoke about the timelines. And I take the liberty of reminding ourselves that the CBI took over this investigation. The first team of the CBI took over the investigation of this case on the 1st of June 2008 and was replaced by a second team of the CBI in September of 2009. So that's a period of some 15-16 months where they came up with a completely alternative narrative. And in the determination of this case, those 15 months when the first team of the CBI was investigating this case, the evidence suggests a big black hole. It's as if no team of the CBI, no investigation was taking place in those 15 months. I have to ask myself the question, given how this case proceeded, how could there not have been reasonable doubt? How did the judge come to the conclusions that he came? And the answer to that is, the evidence that supported the case of the Talwars was treated as conjecture and surmise, and the conjectures and surmises on behalf of the prosecution were treated as gospel truths.
Yes.
That is within the prerogative of the judge. But the question before us is, should it be? And I think lectures, no lectures, doesn't matter. We need to deal with this issue of a changing judicial mindset. I don't blame judges for that mindset. There is a perception that there are too many scoundrels in society, that laws are made for those scoundrels, and so that lawyers can enrich themselves. And I think that is a perspective that is perhaps without foundation. I don't think that was what was in the mind of the founding fathers. I don't think that was what was in the mind of the legislature when they enacted the various laws. The system has served us well. Judges should now judges should educate the public and say the laws are there for a purpose. Proof beyond reasonable doubt is a measure that is there for a purpose. It's for you and for me, rather than feeding into a vein of despondency that sometimes is felt by the public at large. So yes, certainly, is there a need for reform? I don't know whether there's a need for reform, but is this a time for a reality check? I think the Aarushi-Hemraj case, more than any other case in recent years, but there are others, would answer that question in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. Bajaj. We had a case here where the whole principle of law was turned on its head, where they were supposed to be innocent till they were proved guilty. It worked the other way around, and they had to prove their innocence in front of a court law. That too with their hands tied behind. They were not allowed defense witnesses, they were not allowed their documents, they were not allowed scientific reports. In that system and in that case, how do you fight for justice? One of the biggest issues which we've been grappling with in this case has been the role of the media. And the damage which has been done by sections of irresponsible media is untold. It's actually untold. And it's just a horrific amount of damage which has happened. Now, the media plays an extremely important role in a democratic society. One cannot belittle the importance of the media. Ultimately, it is the media which will be giving the news and information to the public. It's the wire media. But what do you do to a media which is not accountable, the media which is not ethical, and which passes off news which is incorrect? How does one deal with that? We have with us a member of the media, Mr. Somwanshi. I'd like him to come and speak, and especially the role which the media has played in this case.
मीडिया के संदर्भ में अगर मैं अपनी बात कहने के लिए खड़ा हूँ तो सवाल मीडिया ट्रायल का जैसे जिक्र होता है, ये शब्द बोला जाता है, मुझे शब्द ही कुछ गड़बड़ लगता है। गड़बड़ इस तरह लगता है कि ट्रायल जो है वो एक प्रोसेस होता है, और ये जिसको हम मीडिया ट्रायल बताते हैं ये बिल्कुल फैसले की तरह आता है। तो स्वाभाविक तौर पे कोई भी आदमी जो लोकतंत्र में भरोसा करता है, एक न्याय व्यवस्था में भरोसा करता है, एक सामाजिक व्यवस्था में भरोसा करता है, तो वह इस मीडिया ट्रायल जैसी व्यवस्था के खिलाफ खड़ा होगा। लेकिन हमें ये देखना होगा कि आखिर ये चीजें आई कहाँ से। आखिर वही चीजें जब समाज में जाती हैं तो समाज उसे एक्सेप्ट क्यों करता है। हम इन दो केसों के हवाले से बात कर रहे हैं, और हम जब प्रियदर्शनी मट्टू का मामला देखते हैं, जब हम जैसिका लाल का मामला देखते हैं, शिवानी भटनागर वाले मामले को देखते हैं, और आदर्श सोसाइटी देखते हैं, नीतीश कटारा देखते हैं, वहां जब मीडिया बहुत आगे बढ़ के काम कर रहा होता है तो बड़ा एक सोशल एक्सेप्टेंस आता है। वो इसलिए आता है कि बहुत सारी जगह पे बड़े पावरफुल वहां भी लोग होते हैं, तो लोगों को ये लगता है कि हाँ मीडिया अब थोड़ा सा बेहतर काम कर रहा है। तो मुझे लगता है कि ये जो और वहां भी जो दूसरा पक्ष है वो पक्ष ये कहता है कि साहब जी हमारे साथ मीडिया ट्रायल किया गया, चाहे वो डीपी यादव हो और चाहे दूसरे पक्ष के और भी बड़े समर्थ लोग हों, जिसमें मुख्यमंत्री जैसे लोग शामिल हों आदर्श सोसाइटी के मामले में। तो और अच्छी बात यह है कि आज हम अगर सोनाली और आरुषि के हवाले से बात करने के लिए यहाँ पर इकट्ठा हुए हैं, तो हो सकता है मीडिया की इस भूमिका को हम और बड़े लेवल पर देखें। हमारी जो पीड़ा होती है कि आप सोचिए, हम सारे लोग कई सारे मामलों में बड़े गुनहगार से लोग होते हैं। जैसे आप बहुत सारे तथ्य बता रहे हैं आरुषि के मामले में, हो सकता है कुछ तथ्यों को हम जानते हो, कुछ तथ्यों को न जानते हो। इसी तरह के हजारों मामलों के तथ्य हैं जो आदिवासियों के सवाल पे हैं। आप किसी को नाम ले लीजिए कि अगर वो नक्सल के आंदोलन में पकड़ लिया गया, कह दिया गया नक्सली शब्द, तो हम में से तमाम सारे लोग उसके खिलाफ जितनी खबरें छापी जाएंगी हम सब सही मान लेंगे। किसी का नाम अगर किसी समुदाय विशेष से जोड़ के अगर उसे पकड़ लिया जाएगा तो हम पहले ही दिन हमारे वकील साहबान लोग अदालतों में कचहरियों में खड़े होकर कह देंगे कि आतंकवादियों का हम मुकदमा नहीं लड़ेंगे, भले वो पूरे साल भर में उससे बरी हो जाए। तो सवाल ये है कि महिलाओं का सवाल है, तो मीडिया ट्रायल इस तरह से गुनाह की श्रेणी में आ जाता है कि उसे कुछ व्यक्ति संचालित करते हैं। एक रिपोर्टर जो लिख रहा है उसकी महिलाओं के बारे में क्या समझ है, एक एडिटर जो देख रहा है उसका अल्पसंख्यकों के बारे में क्या रुझान है, और वो क्या समझते हैं बाकी जो सामाजिक सवाल है। और जो ट्रायल शब्द है वो ट्रायल शब्द न्याय व्यवस्था से आता है। वहां कहा जाता है कि साहब 100 बेगुनाह छूट जाए, 100 दोषी छूट जाए, लेकिन एक बेगुनाह नहीं फंसना चाहिए। और मीडिया ट्रायल में गलत व्यवस्था ये हो जाती है कि एक गुनाहगार को पकड़ने के लिए हम 100 बेगुनाहों पे उंगली उठाते हैं। तो ये जो चीज होती है कि बिल्कुल गलत होती है। तो मैं यहाँ इस बात को कहने के लिए खड़ा हुआ हूँ, और सिर्फ एक बात उदाहरण बहुत सारे मैं दे सकता हूँ कि कैसे 5 आदिवासियों के लिए खबर लंबे समय से छप रही थी कि वो देशद्रोह में जेल गए। लगातार उत्तर प्रदेश और मध्य प्रदेश की सीमा पे अचानक ये आया कि भाई इन्होंने कौन सा देशद्रोह किया होगा। खबरें लगातार छप रही हैं। आप जानते हैं लोअर कोर्ट से उनकी बेल रिजेक्ट होती है, कागज नहीं देखे जाते हैं, और जब वो हाई कोर्ट में मामला आता है और उनका वकील कहता है कि साहब एक बार पता तो करवाइए, फर्जी जजमेंट के आधार पे पुलिस को फर्जी जजमेंट भेज दिया गया, और वो 5 आदिवासियों के परिवार के लोग डरते डरते जाते थे, बाहर बैठे रहते थे पुलिस के यहाँ, कहते साहब हमारा गुनाह तो बता दीजिए। गांव में आपस के झगड़े में ग्राम प्रधान के चुनाव में दूसरी पार्टी के लोगों ने फर्जी जजमेंट बना के पुलिस को भिजवाया। पुलिस ने देखा ही नहीं कि जिस नाम के जज लिखे गए और जिस पूरे प्रोसेस से जजमेंट आता है वो कैसे आया। ऊपर सब लगते आदेश चले गए, नीचे कागज जब्ता चला गया और 5 लोग 41 दिन जेल में काट के आए वो चीजें। और जब वो बरी हो गए तो वो छूटे तो ऐसे भागे कि उनके वकील तराशते थे कि हम कंपनसेशन फाइल करेंगे। वो लोग कैसे हमारी जान छोड़ दीजिए, आपकी जो फीस है हम अपना खेत बेच के दे देंगे, हम दोबारा नहीं दिखाई पड़ेंगे। तो मुझे लगता है कि जब हम यहां से बात करेंगे तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन क्लब के इस हवाले से वहां तक जरूर बात जानी चाहिए, क्योंकि अगर बात वहां तक जाती है तभी कोई बात बनती है। और मैं इस पक्ष में हूं कि हाँ, अगर जुडिशियल अकाउंटेबिलिटी के बिल की बात होती है तो मीडिया के अकाउंटेबिलिटी के बिल की बात होनी चाहिए, उस व्यवस्था की बात होनी चाहिए। और हम सारे लोग एक मजबूत लोकतंत्र, एक मजबूत सामाजिक व्यवस्था के लिए चाहते हैं कि मीडिया को जिम्मेदार और जवाबदेह होना चाहिए। धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Pradap. Accountability, along with it, accountability of the media, which is a very positive thought. I think we also have to look at ethics, which the media needs to look into, and what is the verification of a fact. The whole character assassination of a dead girl without any proof, just because someone has said it, and then that becomes the whole issue around which the case is sorted out. We have Kavita Krishnan. Kavita has worked with women, so I want Kavita to come and speak for us.
कहने के लिए तो बहुत सारी चीजें हैं, मैं कोशिश करूंगी कि कुछ बातों पर ही जोर दूं। इस मामले में जब से ये मामला हुआ है तब से मैंने बहुत कोशिश की थी कि तथ्यों को जाना जाए, क्योंकि इतना भयानक मर्डर था एक छोटी बच्ची का और एक डोमेस्टिक वर्कर का। तो शुरू से ही मुझे अभी भी याद है कि जब वो यूपी पुलिस के जो प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस देखते हुए कैसा महसूस हुआ था, और जिसमें वो बता रहे थे बड़े ग्राफिक तरीके से कि एक तरह से वो चित्र बना रहे थे शब्दों से, एक ऐसा चित्र जिससे वो चाहते थे कि हमारे मन में उस बच्ची और जो मृत हेमराज थे उनके बारे में हमारे मन में कई तरह के अश्लील चित्र बने। वो चित्र जो कि हम चाहते हुए भी, हो सकता है हम हमारे डीपेस्ट माइंड में हम नहीं एडमिट करना चाहें, लेकिन ऐसे चित्र जो कि एकदम मतलब सॉफ्ट पोर्नोग्राफिक जो इमेजरी है वो बन पाए। और मैंने ये देखा है इतने सारे रेप के मामलों में। देखिए, मीडिया का लोग समझते हैं आजकल, खास करके पिछले 1 साल में, कि न्याय का रास्ता मीडिया के टीवी चैनल से जाता है। ऐसा नहीं होता है, बिल्कुल नहीं होता है। आप में से जो लोग मुझे पहचानते हैं टीवी के पर्दों से, मैं आपको भी बताना चाहती हूँ कि मैं जितने समय से काम करती हूँ, पिछले 1 साल में जरूर कुछ मौका मिला है जिसमें महिलाओं के बारे में कुछ कहने का टीवी के पर्दों से जब मौका मिला है तो मैं जरूर गई हूँ। लेकिन मैं हमेशा जानती हूँ कि इट्स अ डबल एजेड स्वॉर्ड। द मीडिया डज नॉट नॉर्मली बिहेव फेयरली विथ वुमेन एट ऑल। द मीडिया इज नॉट अ जस्ट प्लेस फॉर वुमेन एट ऑल। द रोड टू जस्टिस फॉर वुमेन डजंट कम थ्रू द मीडिया। Largely, in the vast majority of cases, we are contending with a very hostile media for justice for women. And even in recent rape cases, even if you remember the case in which Tejpal is accused, उसमें भी मैंने एक मीडिया चैनल को देखा था जिसमें इसी तरह के चित्र, मतलब लिटरली चित्र बना करके दिखाए थे, जिसमें वो चाहते थे कि आपके माइंड में कुछ खास तरह की इमेजेस बैठे, और वो तथाकथित लड़की के लिए न्याय के नाम पर हो रहा था। इस मामले में भी सबसे मुझे चिंता की बात ये लगती है कि वही चीज जिस यूपी पुलिस के नैरेटिव पे उस समय हम सबने इतनी आउटरीच बताई थी, कहा था कि ये कितनी भयानक चीज बोल रहे हैं, किस आधार पे बोल रहे हैं। वो तो मर्डर के कुछ ही दिनों बाद बोल रहे थे, जब उन्होंने तो दूसरी डेड बॉडी तक नहीं खोजी थी, फिंगरप्रिंट्स नहीं सेफगार्ड किया था, कुछ नहीं किया था, लेकिन कुछ ही दिनों के अंदर उनको पता लग गया कि ऐसा हुआ था, जैसे वो आंखों देखे गवाह बता रहे थे। लेकिन आज उस कोर्ट रूम में वही नैरेटिव, फाइनली सीबीआई भी उसी नैरेटिव को एक्सेप्ट की और उसी नैरेटिव को पेश किया गया कोर्ट रूम में। और उसे पेश करने के लिए जो चीजें हुई, ये मुझे बेहद परेशान करने वाली लगती। मैं नहीं जानती, मैं अपने आप को यहाँ कहने की स्थिति में नहीं पाती हूँ कि आखिर वो मर्डर किसने किया। मैं नहीं जानती। मैं ये भी नहीं जानती कि क्या पेरेंट्स वाकई में निर्दोष है कि नहीं, मैं बिल्कुल नहीं जानती। लेकिन मैं ये जरूर जानती हूँ कि इफ वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट अकाउंटेबिलिटी ऑफ इंस्टीट्यूशंस, I've seen this in so many other cases as well, which I'll briefly talk about later. लेकिन I think the accountability is about the fact that different separate institutions should not be obedient to the investigators. Your doctors cannot be obedient to the investigators. The media should not be obedient stenographers for the investigators. उनका काम इंडिपेंडेंट होना चाहिए। तब जाकर के हम कोई अकाउंटेबिलिटी की स्ट्रक्चर बना सकते हैं जहां हम एक दूसरे अलग अलग संस्थाएं हर संस्था पर निगाह रख सके, उसको अकाउंटेबल रख सके, उसको बांध सके। ये ऐसा आमतौर पे होता नहीं है, खास करके मैं बाद में ऐसे केसेस पर आऊंगी। लेकिन इस केस में क्या हुआ, इस केस में जो मुझे सबसे परेशान करने वाली बात जो लगती है, मुझे लगती है वो बात जिसमें जिन डॉक्टर्स ने पोस्टमार्टम इन्वेस्टिगेशन उस बच्चे की, वो डॉक्टर्स वही डॉक्टर वो बाद में अपना वो उस समय कहते हैं कि हमें तो कोई एबनॉर्मेलिटी डिटेक्ट नहीं हुई उसके गुप्तांगों में, उसमें कुछ भी ऐसा पता नहीं लगा। उसके बाद वो बाद में पलट जाते हैं, जब सीबीआई की नैरेटिव बदल जाती है, सीबीआई की स्टोरी बदल जाती है, तो डॉक्टर की भी स्टोरी बदल जाती है। एक पूरे टीम उसको देखती है, उस बॉडी को, उसकी रिपोर्ट से हट करके वो नई बात कहने लगते हैं और कहते हैं कि नहीं साहब बड़ा हैबिचुअल सेक्सुअल एक्टिविटी चल रही थी। कहां से ये बात आती है और इस पर क्यों ये अपने आप में शक के दायरे में क्यों नहीं आता? ये जज को क्यों नहीं लगता कि अगर कोई इस तरह से पलटा है अपने बयान से एक डॉक्टर, तो ये क्यों नहीं ये शक तुरंत लगना चाहिए कि आखिर किस दबाव में ये पलटे? उतना ही नहीं, बड़े कन्वीनियंटली जो सबसे शॉकिंग बात कि जिन्होंने हेमराज की बॉडी के बारे में कहा, जिन डॉक्टर साहब ने, वो डॉक्टर है, उन्होंने मेडिकल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस की किताबें लगता पढ़ी नहीं थी। वो ऐसी चीज बताते हैं, वो कहने लगते हैं, मैं यहाँ उसको रिपीट बहुत ज्यादा नहीं करना चाहती, लेकिन इतना जरूर वो कहते हैं कि जो जिस स्टेट में बॉडी पाई गई और हेमराज के जेनिटल्स जिस स्टेट में पाए गए, उससे पता लगता है कि वो अराउज्ड थे जिस समय ये हो रहा था, जिस समय उनकी मर्डर हुई। बाद में जब उन्हें बताया गया कि मेडिकल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस की किताबों में लिखा है कि अगर कोई डेड बॉडी प्यूट्रिफैक्शन की स्थिति में हो, तो आमतौर पर शरीर के कई अंग जिसमें गुप्तांग भी होते हैं वो इसी हालत में पहुंचते हैं। उस पर वो कहते हैं कि अच्छा मैं तो एज ए मैरिड मैन बोल रहा था, एज एन एक्सपर्ट नहीं बोल रहा था। ये क्या है? ये क्या है? इट वुड बी फनी, इट वुड बी रियली फनी इफ दिस वाज पिंक पैंथर मूवी, बट दिस इजंट, राइट? This involves living people. This involves justice to people who were dead. What are you saying in the name of justice? जब मैं हेमराज की फैमिली को कहते हुए कि हाँ भाई न्याय हो गया, उस समय मुझे लगता है कि वो समझ रहे हैं कि आपने आपके परिवार से जो मारे गए, he would be a rapist. You are saying he was a rapist because with a 14-year-old girl you can't have consensual relationships. That would count as rape. You are saying he was a habitual rapist of a young girl who was under his care in a way, and you are saying that this girl was promiscuous. मैं एक कहानी और आपको बताऊं, एक उदाहरण। मैं एक बार एक टीवी स्टूडियो में जब इस बारे में जब न्यूज आ रहा था, मैं किसी और मामले में वहां गई हुई थी, तो वहां पर जो मेरे साथ जो गेस्ट कोऑर्डिनेटर थे वो बैठ करके बात कर रहे थे। उन्होंने बताया कि अरे हमने इतना कुछ किया इसमें न्याय के लिए, आरुषि के क्लासमेट्स को बिठाया, आरुषि के क्लासमेट्स को हमने देखा, उन्होंने क्या सेलिब्रेट किया वगैरह वगैरह कुछ बताया। उसके बाद वो मुझे बताने लगे, उनके चेहरे में जो एक्सप्रेशन था वो मुझे अभी भी याद है। वो बड़े अजीब टाइप के एक्सप्रेशन से कहने लगे, लेकिन वो जो क्लासमेट्स है वो भी अजीब है, उसमें से तो कोई स्मोक करते हैं, उसमें उनके कैरेक्टर के बारे में, उनके आपसी इंटरेक्शन के बारे में, यंग गर्ल्स एंड बॉयज, बट ही वाज टॉकिंग एज दो देयर कैरेक्टर, ओके, एंड that was saying something. So it wasn't just about Arushi's character now. It was about that entire generation. It was as to say, with this generation of young people, who knows what they might do, that she could have a raging affair with a man in the household. I am not one of those. मैं इतने सारे केसेस को देखी जिसमें पेरेंट्स ने बच्चों को मारा है, सही बात है, बिल्कुल सही बात है, हाँ मारा है, लेकिन मैं मानती हूँ कि this case doesn't ring true in that respect, क्योंकि जिस तरह की नैरेटिव आई है पुलिस की तरफ से, उसकी वजह से, मैं पेरेंट्स की तरफ से जो नैरेटिव आ रही है, फैमिली की तरफ से जो नैरेटिव आ रही है, उसकी वजह से मैं कही नहीं रही। मुझे सबसे सस्पिशियस लगता है कि जो नैरेटिव हमको सीबीआई की तरफ से और पुलिस की तरफ से मिला है वो, और जिस तरह से उसके लिए सजाया गया है, चीजों को। सबसे और एक बात, जो फॉरेंसिक इन्वेस्टिगेशन है, इससे मुझे बेहद चिंता होती है, खास करके जब लोग कहते हैं कि अच्छा डीएनए की हम वो बनाएंगे, बैंक बनाएंगे, लाइब्रेरी बनाएंगे। डीएनए को सेफगार्ड करने का केस आफ्टर केस में पाया गया है, एक से ज्यादा केसेस हैं, और ये केस तो क्लासिक एग्जाम्पल है, जहां पर आप कुछ भी करके आप ये कर दे सकते हैं कि डीएनए जांच में तो भाई जो हमने आपकी कोई एक रिपोर्ट है, वो अगर आपके स्टोरी के साथ कन्वीनियंट नहीं बैठती तो 2 साल बाद कह दीजिए कि ये तो टाइपोग्राफिकल एरर थी। अभी अभी बेंगलुरु में एक छोटी बच्ची की रेप के मामले में स्ट्रगल चल रहा है। The courts are completely insensitive to the fact that her father is accused of having serially raped her for a long period of time, a little girl of 3 years. But the courts are happily allowing the accused to meet with the child. And what exactly is happening, what he is clinging on to, and this also is another kind of media trial, because that father in this particular case is actually manipulating the media to look good in the media, to make himself out to be the victim. उसमें क्या हुआ है डीएनए जांच में? डीएनए जांच में पता लगता है कि ना लड़की की डीएनए मिली, ना फादर का डीएनए मिला। इसको मीडिया ने इस रूप में प्रेजेंट किया है कि फादर तो निर्दोष है क्योंकि फादर की डीएनए मिली नहीं, लेकिन मेडिकल रिपोर्ट में बिल्कुल साफ था कि द गर्ल हैज बीन सब्जेक्टेड, her genitals, especially her anus as well as her vagina are subjected to, it's obviously prolonged rape, a little girl. लेकिन उस केस में किसने रेप किया ये सवाल पूछने के बजाय ये कहा जा रहा है कि फादर को तो क्लीन चिट वो नहीं थे, लड़की की डीएनए क्यों नहीं थी? यानी आपने किसी का डीएनए हो सकता है सब्स्टिट्यूट किया, क्या किया उसने? ये चीजें बेहद चिंता पैदा करती हैं इस मामले में। एक और आखिरी बात मैं कहूं वो ये कि इस पूरी कहानी से जब से ये घटना हुई, इस पूरे आरुषि मामले में, मैंने पहले भी इस बात को कहा है, मुझे लगता है कि हम लोगों को सचमुच सोचना चाहिए, जो कि प्रताप जी ने भी इस दिशा में इंडिकेट किया, कि इससे हम लोग कल जब अखबार पढ़ेंगे तो हर मीडिया नैरेटिव पे हम लोगों को एक क्वेश्चन मार्क जरूर होना चाहिए। इस मामले में शायद आप में से यहाँ बैठे हुए लोग हो सकता है नजदीक हो, जानते हो, तथ्यों से ज्यादा नजदीक हो, इसलिए आपको लगता है हाँ हमको ये बात सुनने में यहाँ आप लोग ताली बजा रहे हैं। लेकिन मैं अगर ये कहूँ, और मैं माफी चाहती हूँ यहाँ पर इस पैनल के साथ भी, हो सकता है मैं सबके साथ सहमत ना हूँ इस मामले में, देयर हैव बीन ओकेजन्स जहाँ पर और मामलों में, फॉर इंस्टेंस टेरर केसेस में, वी हैव ट्राइड टू रेज सिमिलर क्वेश्चंस even in cases where the honorable justices have been involved as well, जहाँ पर हमने भी सोचा है, हमने भी पाया है as citizens of this country कि सारे तथ्य नहीं आए हैं, कि एक communal narrative ने या एक खास तरह के compulsion, national conscience की compulsion, national conscience क्या है? national conscience की compulsion से किसी को सजा देना जरूरी हो जाता है, चाहे वो तथ्य मिले चाहे नहीं मिले। यही तो हो रहा है आरुषि के मामले में। मैं इसीलिए यहाँ बोलने आई क्योंकि मुझे लगा कि कई लोगों ने मुझसे कहा कि इसमें थोड़ा ध्यान रखिए क्योंकि ये तो बड़ा पॉपुलर मामला है नहीं, इसमें बोलने की क्या जरूरत है, ये तो कोई पॉलिटिकल मामला नहीं है, ये कोई स्टेट रिप्रेशन का मसला नहीं है, ये क्या है। मैंने ये कहा कि अगर बगल के यहाँ प्रेस क्लब में बगल में आज सोनी सोरी बोल रही है, सोनी सोरी एक छत्तीसगढ़ी महिला है जो एक्यूज्ड है कई सारे, मतलब लॉन्ग लिस्ट ऑफ केसेस नक्सली होने का, उसमें सारे केसेस में उसको अभी बेल मिला है और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बेल देते हुए ऑब्जर्व किया कि मोस्ट प्रोबेबली वो एक्विट हो जाएगी केसेस में। वो केसेस क्योंकि इतने फ्लिमजी हैं, लेकिन लोगों के मन में सोनी सोरी और लिंगराज कुडोपी, अगर आप, मैं छत्तीसगढ़ की हूँ, मैं उस राज्य की हूँ, दिल्ली में शायद उसके बारे में थोड़ा सा अलग इंप्रेशन अब तक बन गया। छत्तीसगढ़ में आप बात करिए सोनी सोरी की तो आमतौर पर आपको, क्योंकि वहां की मीडिया ने बिल्कुल कुछ अलाउ नहीं किया, वहां के किसी से भी बात करें तो सोनी सोरी का नाम लेते साथ लोगों के चेहरे पर एक दूसरा भाव आ जाता है और लोग कहते हैं आप तो नक्सली के पक्ष में बोल रहे। इसीलिए मैं ये कहना चाहती हूँ कि आतंकवाद के मामले, नक्सल सो कॉल्ड नक्सल मामले, गरीबों के मामले, इस मामले में the possible victims of the miscarriage of justice might be middle class. But I'm just saying that we need to remember that in the vast majority of the cases, in this kind of case, at least we are sitting here in this room, so many people talking about it. In the vast majority of the cases of miscarriages of justice of this kind, this doesn't happen. This can't happen because the bias is so strong against the person who is at the receiving end that it's impossible to talk about it. So my final point is just the very last one, I know I've taken time. My final point here is that when we talk about police reform or about the reform of the system, मैं humbly ये कहना चाहूँगी कि मेरा जो मैं पुलिस रिफॉर्म से एक्सपेक्ट करूँगी और सिस्टमिक रिफॉर्म से एक्सपेक्ट करूँगी, वो जो फॉर्मर पुलिस ऑफिसर्स हैं जिन्होंने बनाया है उससे मेरा थोड़ा भिन्न। मैं ये जरूर चाहती हूँ कि पॉलिटिकल कंट्रोल से पुलिस को मुक्त होना चाहिए, ये बेहद जरूरी है, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि सबसे ज्यादा हमारे देश के संविधान के तहत पुलिस काम करेगी कि नहीं करेगी, महिलाओं के मामले में महिलाओं के प्रति उसके क्या नजरिया है। दिस शुड बी अ क्वालिफाइंग थिंग फॉर व्हेदर यू बिकम अ पुलिस ऑफिसर और नॉट। What is your, do you meet the constitutional standards for your attitudes towards women, towards Dalits, towards oppressed castes, towards minorities? What is your understanding on all of this? और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल वैल्यूज के प्रति आपका बिहेवियर कैसा है, इसको वहां पर अकाउंटेबिलिटी लाना है। वो चाहे इस तरह के मिसकैरेज ऑफ जस्टिस के मामले में हो, वो चाहे फॉल्स केसेस, फॉल्स फ्रेमिंग ऑफ पर्सन्स हो टेरर के मामले में, फॉल्स केसेस हो सिंपल थेफ्ट के मामले में जो आए दिन पुलिस कर देते हैं, इन सारे मामले में अकाउंटेबिलिटी, कस्टोडियल किलिंग्स, कस्टोडियल टॉर्चर के मामले में, इन सारे मामलों के खिलाफ उतनी ही जोर से बोलना जरूरी है मुझे लगता है जितनी हम लोग और इन सारी चीजों को पुलिस रिफॉर्म के दायरे में लाना जरूरी है। हमारे फोरेंसिक इन्वेस्टिगेशंस, मेडिकल इन्वेस्टिगेशंस, इन सारी चीजों की अकाउंटेबिलिटी, उसकी ऑटोनॉमी, उसकी ट्रांसपेरेंसी और इन सारी चीजों को कैसे इंश्योर करेंगे, इन चीजों को भी दायरे में लाने की जरूरत है। मुझे महसूस होता है कि एक मॉडर्न और ट्रूली डेमोक्रेटिक और ट्रूली अकाउंटेबल सिस्टम की जरूरत है इस मामले में। इसके लिए हम लोग संघर्ष करेंगे और इस तरह के पेनफुल जो मोमेंट्स हैं उससे गुजरना आसान तो है नहीं, लेकिन एक दूसरे को साथ देते हुए जरूर इससे आगे बढ़ें।
Thank you very much, Kavita. We surely would like there to be a system of reform and accountability which goes beyond one Shonali Mukherjee, one Aarushi, and some of you here may have got involved in this process because of the case of Aarushi, but once you are here, one can move on and take this struggle to a much larger level, and I hope that really happens. We are running short of time, so we have Shalini will speak now, and then after that we'll have a brief question-answer session with the audience.
Thank you very much for asking me to speak here. I have been observing this case very closely, and it has nothing to do with any personal connection to the family. I had got to know them very recently under tragic circumstances when the conviction was actually done. But the first article that I wrote in the Hindustan Times, I wrote actually in 2008, in the very same month that Aarushi had been killed. And like Kavita, what inspired me to take interest in this case was what Gurdarshan Singh was saying on television. And I was absolutely shocked. Not just at the salaciousness of his innuendos and suggestions and saying that the father was as characterless as the daughter, they were found in objectionable but not compromising positions, but at the idea that an IG of police had solved a case even before he had investigated it. I mean, how did he come to this conclusion even before the investigations had begun? And then, of course, there was a furor about what he said. Everybody was rightly and legitimately quite scandalized that, the remarks that he had made and, all kinds of things happened. He was probably transferred. But something very insidious happened, and that is the insinuations that he had made. They continued to play in the minds of people. This whole story, this narrative, and we have seen how far this narrative has gone. This narrative is now the crux of the story. Because without the narrative of Aarushi and Hemraj being in this objectionable but not compromising position, even though I have no idea what that means, that is the crux of the matter. Because that explain the grave and sudden provocation by which he was killed. And this, despite the fact that the DNA and blood of Hemraj is not found in Aarushi's room. So, and the explanation that the CBI gives for that is that they dressed up the scene of crime. The judgment seems to be believing that story, that it was dressed up, that they dressed up the scene of crime. Now I ask you a simple question. If indeed the parent, the father, because of grave and sudden provocation killed his daughter, and then you have to be a really trained murderer to go around dressing up the scene of crime, having your wits about you, getting, making sure that the body of Hemraj is taken up to the terrace, and many newspapers have given us the impression that the staircase to the terrace is from inside the house. It is not. I understand that because it's very much like the layout of my own house, where you have to go outside, drag the body up the stairs, leave the body there, put the panel of the cooler over there, come down, and your body, your clothes must be all soaked in blood, and then you have to bundle up those clothes, go out of the house, get rid of them because nobody found them. You expect me to believe this cock and bull story? I have come into this case, I have studied it carefully. I don't need anything other than common sense because I'm not a legal person. I do not understand legalese. But I must say that many of the lawyers who are involved with the case have helped me understand it by giving me certain kinds of, making certain kinds of documents available to me. Some of the papers that I saw was also a correspondence that Rajesh was having with the CBI, the first team of the CBI, asking for the touch DNA test to be done. The touch DNA is a very sophisticated test, and if there is an object that has been touched by a number of people, the touch DNA test is still able to find out the, fingerprints. It beats me. Why would a father who's killed his daughter go out of his way to tell the investigative agencies that please, do a superior test so that I can go to jail? It doesn't quite add up to me. Where the case, the CBI has really won. It's not something that they have plotted and planned entirely on their own, but through strange convergence of circumstances that a certain prejudicial mindset actually spread like poison through everybody. People were convinced. There are many people who tell me, even now, oh, the parents have done it. How do you know? We know. You see, nobody can know because nobody was there. And there's a very famous film called The Thin Blue Line, which talks exactly this, that if you were not there on the scene of crime, you don't know what happened. And your ethical responsibility is to say, I don't know what happened. And then start from that point on. Instead of doing what television reconstruction does, it tells you what happened when you weren't there. So people have a narrative in their heads, even without being there. So you're not even leaving yourself open to the idea, that there could be some other way out of this. Now, what's worse? Even the courts don't seem to believe in the idea of reasonable doubt. Now, the closure report clearly says that we cannot pursue this further because there's insufficient evidence. Then the magistrate is within her rights to say, no, there is prima facie evidence. Now please, proceed. Now, the CBI has a difficult task of turning speculations into evidence. How do you do that? Now, I have kept a meticulous newspaper archive of all the, reports that have come out. Hindustan Times carries a story that the killer wore gloves, but we haven't found those gloves. If we find the gloves, it will be a very important finding, because that will solve the question as to why the fingerprints weren't there. This sounds really like a comedy show. And if it did not involve real lives and the tragedies that befell on the family, I would actually laugh about it, but it is not laughable simply because it is so tragic. The other thing that went, I think, against the case is that certain questions that were repeatedly answered by the family, by the defense lawyers, by everybody, kept circulating, router activity. The closure report has explained about the router activity. The closure report actually explains to you that this is not any evidence, we cannot take this seriously. But the magistrate Preeti Singh, when she is passing the order, says the router activity is not explained, but it is explained in the closure report. So it is like a crazy jigsaw puzzle. I mean, things that are apparent to me, and I'm not even a legal person, I cannot believe that legal professionals cannot see those ideas. And then they talk about the whiskey bottle. And in fact, one of the Hindustan Times articles talks about how the killer wore gloves. It's the same old glove article, and it says that they wore the gloves. That is why you could not find the fingerprints. Now, I can say this about anybody, that you came to my house and you burgled my house and you wore gloves, and that's why your fingerprints were not found. So what if I do not have any evidence against you? You did it because I think so, I don't like your face. It's a bit like that, you know? But what the newspaper sadly did not report, and I think Aviduk Sen is the only person who went to the court, and I haven't met you, but I'm seeing you today for the first time, I've only read what you've written, is that every day he would write from the courts and tell us what was happening. And if you were to read what he wrote, the absurdity of the situation would be entirely clear to you. Now let me talk about the whiskey bottle. Not only were there no fingerprints found, there was no match found. So how is it possible? And there is this narrative that the CBI gives that the killer must have been really nervous and then he drank from the whiskey bottle. Well, the whiskey bottle was sent for forensic evidence, saliva, is it
of blood. And they got convicted, and there was, wow, what a great judgment. Wow, justice has been served. That was the mob mentality which I experienced for the first time that day, and I was really, really shaken. So I think this is something which we really have to be careful about, where the media can unleash this kind of horrific damage. Let's have some questions. We don't have much time, but please, sir.
I think I'll start with a disclaimer. I'm not a legal person. I'm a scientist. But there's a tremendous commonality. There is a tremendous commonality between science and law. Yeah. There is a tremendous commonality between science and law, and it starts with three presumptions. The first is... Can I be heard? Right. Yeah, usually the echo is worse, but... All right, the first point is that decisions are based on facts. The second point, which was told to me years ago by my PhD guide, who was a Nobel Prize winner, is you have no right to disbelieve what you cannot disprove. And the third, which I think has been addressed by many of the eminent speakers here, is that you can either believe in systems and be part of them, or disbelieve in systems. In science, systems everything, right? But people forget that even Newton's laws were proven wrong. What I'd like to ask are just two questions. Regrettably, Justice Dean had to leave because he was pressed for time. But I would ask it of Mr. Hemraj. Our Constitution guarantees us a process by which laws are enacted by the legislative, taken care of in implementation by the executive, and are judged by judicial. Fundamentally, in the cases that have been described, when we use the word miscarriage of justice, we are sitting in judgment on all three. But most of all, on the judiciary. This is not a courtroom. We do not judge over here. Therefore, leaving aside everything that was talked about in the two cases, what I ask you is, if we really wanted reforms, the only way is the legislative. And what would we need to do as a collection, as a nation, to make sure that Aarushi or Sonali never happens again? That's my question.
Well, I agree with you that really our judgment, and many of the speakers have implicitly passed a judgment, it's against the judiciary. It's against the judiciary. There's been an emerging movement. Aarushi is just one example of it. For many, many years, it has been my view, maybe a biased view because I am essentially a defense lawyer, but it has been my view that the judiciary has put itself in the place of both the investigating team as also the prosecution. That independence that we expect the judiciary to show has been lost. And I don't say that the judiciary does this with any real malice. I think it's done because the judiciary feels also a sense of the public's frustration with the system filtering through. So judges feel, as I indicated when I was saying, judges sometimes feel that there's too much lawlessness in society. If I rely entirely on the police, if I rely entirely on the prosecution, you have very fancy lawyers on the one side, you have a prosecutor on the one side who has to deal with every single case that comes to that court. He's overworked, underpaid, and so I have to step into their shoes and thereby balance the equation. I think that's a dangerous view to take. The other expression of I think what the judiciary has been expressing over and over again over the last few years is that the system doesn't work. By stepping into the shoes of the prosecution and the police, they send the message the system doesn't work. I believe the system works really well if you let it work.
Yes.
And this cynicism, that's why I blame the judiciary, that there's this cynicism. Now, how do we make it better? I think one of the ways of making it better is to no longer treat the conduct of the judiciary as a taboo. That we cannot discuss how judges conduct themselves. I think it is proper to discuss. And if at the end of the day, it means that some of us will face contempt issues, so be it. But I think this is a critical question, and it is going to remain doubly critical as we proceed. The question of how judges judge and how they conduct themselves must be put into the public domain. It must be examined. That process has to start in meetings like this. I'm not a great believer in going to India Gate and doing that kind of protest. But this, to me, I'm here today. I'm talking about this. This is my protest, and I hope that there'll be more meetings and that we build a momentum. This has been taboo for too long, and it has to stop being taboo.
आरुषि केस को लेकर मुझे इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे आना पड़ा, बड़ी खुशी है। सबसे पहले मैं ईश्वर से प्रार्थना करूंगा कि उस दंपति को रिलीफ मिले। उससे कई जुड़ी हुई चीजें सामने आई हैं। मीडिया की चर्चा हुई, जुडिशियरी की चर्चा हुई, पुलिस की चर्चा हुई, लेकिन मैं आप लोगों के साथ को एक मैसेज देना चाह रहा हूं, एक संवाद। हम बुद्धिजीवियों में, इंटेलेक्चुअल्स में सबसे बड़ा डिफेक्ट ये है कि हम डिस्कस तो करते हैं लेकिन उसका सॉल्यूशन नहीं करते, सॉल्यूशन नहीं निकालते। हम ये नहीं कहते कि फिर क्या करना चाहिए। ये आप बहुत से लोगों को बुरा लग सकता है, लेकिन सत्य यही है। इस तरह के बहुत सारे सैकड़ों प्लेटफॉर्म पे हमने देखा है, हमने भाग भी लिया है, हमने भी कुछ कहा है, लेकिन डिसीजन हम नहीं लेते। इस प्लेटफॉर्म के माध्यम से मैं बुद्धिजीवियों में ये संवाद दूंगा कि आप जागिए। पूरे सिस्टम में बदलाव की जरूरत है। ये सारा सिस्टम हमारा बिगड़ चुका है, इसलिए जब तक आप इस सिस्टम को नहीं बदलेंगे, जब तक बुद्धिजीवी इकट्ठे नहीं होंगे, देश में सुधार नहीं होगा। आरुषि की तरह बहुत सारे केसेस आते रहेंगे, आज हैं, कल भी आएगा, परसों भी आएगा। जुडिशियरी के बारे में मैं एक चीज कहना पसंद करूंगा। जुडिशियरी निर्भर करता है कि आपके पास सबूत क्या है। कंप्यूटर के बारे में भी लोग यही कहते हैं कि कंप्यूटर में अगर आप कचरा भर दीजिए, उसको फीड कीजिए, तो उसका जो रिजल्ट है वो कचरा निकलेगा। हमारे जुडिशियरी भी हमें लगता है कि ऐसे ही है। तब जो फीड हम करते हैं, जो पुलिस फोर्स, वो सज्जन चले गए नहीं है, कि हमारे इस सिस्टम में इतना ज्यादा जंक लग गया है, इतना ज्यादा जंक लग गया है। उन्होंने जिक्र भी किया कि 1861 साल के नियमों को हम पालन कर रहे हैं, उसमें रिफॉर्म्स की जरूरत है और ये पॉलिटिशियन से नहीं होगा। वैसे पार्शियली अभी 1-2 साल से मैं भी पॉलिटिशियन बन गया हूँ, लेकिन हूँ पहले से इंजीनियर। मैं ये जरूर कहूंगा कि बुद्धिजीवियों को अलग से एक फोरम बनाना होगा और उस फोरम के माध्यम से इस देश को दिशा निर्देश करना पड़ेगा, तभी इस देश का कल्याण है, वरना नहीं। थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सो मच पावनी। आपने अभी जो बात कही सिस्टम को लेकर बिल्कुल सही कही। डेफिनेटली कोई भी आपसे डिसएग्री नहीं कर सकता और मैं सिस्टम के साथ में एक और शब्द का इस्तेमाल करूंगी, वो है समाज। सिस्टम समाज का बनाया हुआ है, राइट। और मैं यहाँ पर जितना जल्दी हो सकेगा अपनी बात खत्म करने की कोशिश करूंगी। मैं यहाँ पर केवल अपनी जिंदगी से एक उदाहरण देना चाहूंगी। जिंदगी तो बहुत लंबी नहीं रही, 40 उम्र मेरी अभी हुई नहीं है, लेकिन इतनी छोटी सी उम्र में बहुत कुछ ऐसा पा लिया है इस सिस्टम के द्वारा और इस समाज के द्वारा कि 10 मिनट में, 5 मिनट में, एक रात में, 10 रात में भी शायद पूरा ना कर पाऊं अगर सारा बताने लगूं। इसलिए बहुत छोटा सा करके कहने की कोशिश करती हूँ। हमारे परिवार ने 4 जवान मौतें देखी, 4 जवान मौतें। एक जवान मौत मेरे मामा जी की 28 साल की उम्र में, आर्मी में कैप्टन थे 15th ड्रैगन हॉर्स में। वो मौत किसी युद्ध में नहीं हुई, एक्सीडेंट में हुई, शादी से कुछ दिन पहले। जब हुई तो बच सकते थे अगर सड़क पे से उठाकर हम लोगों ने।
But you know this is a question answer session, so just make your point quickly.
Trust me, my point is extremely valid, and it will do a lot of justice to your cause today.
Sure, I want you to make your point.
I'll make it very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Definitely,
Sure.
definitely. मामा जी का एक्सीडेंट हुआ, किसी ने सड़क से उठाकर समय पर अस्पताल नहीं पहुंचाया, मर गए। उसके बाद मेरा छोटा भाई 20 साल की उम्र में एक लड़की को ईव टीजिंग से बचाने की हिम्मत की उसने, उसका मर्डर किया गया और उस मर्डर में जस्टिस पाने के लिए हमें 12 साल लग गए। और 12 साल हमें तब लग गए जब जिन्होंने उसका मर्डर किया था बाकायदा मीडिया ने सच्चाई अखबार में लिखी थी कि क्या हुआ, और जिन्होंने मर्डर किया था 6 में से 4 लोग क्रिमिनल एलिमेंट्स थे जिनके खिलाफ चार्जशीट्स थी, थानों में, कोर्ट्स में केसेस चल रहे थे। इतने साफ एविडेंस होने के बावजूद मिस्टर तलवार के घर पे जो हुआ कोई गवाह नहीं था। मेरे भाई का मर्डर भरे बाजार में हुआ था, जाने कितने लोगों के सामने, कोई भी गवाह बनने को तैयार नहीं हुआ। फिर भी एविडेंस बहुत था, काफी था, और जिसमें से सबसे बड़ी बात तो ये थी कि ये तो आरुषि के पेरेंट्स थे। मेरे भाई को मारने वाले 4 लोग बाकायदा क्रिमिनल्स थे, कोर्ट्स में केसेस चल रहे थे, वो ऑलरेडी मर्डरर्स थे। इसके बाद भी मेरे परिवार को 12 साल लग गए न्याय पाने में, जिनमें से आज जिंदा केवल एक है जिसको लाइफ इम्प्रिजनमेंट का सजा हुई है, अभी वो हाई कोर्ट में अपील कर रहा है। लेकिन बाकी जो लोग थे या तो आपसी गैंग वॉर में मारे गए या पुलिस ने एनकाउंटर किया। ऐसे लोगों द्वारा मर्डर किए जाने के बावजूद हमको 12 साल लगे जस्टिस पाने में, जबकि मिस्टर तलवार के केस में बड़ी जल्दी फैसला हो गया। इतनी जल्दी फैसला कैसे हो गया? क्योंकि डेफिनेटली मीडिया ने बहुत खूबसूरत रोल प्ले किया है। अब मेरे मर्डर के फौरन ही बाद मेरी शादी हुई अगले साल। 1 साल के अंदर मेरे पति लेट कैप्टन संदीप गुलिया, जिन्होंने कारगिल वॉर में सर्व किया था, वहां से सही सलामत वापस आए। पाकिस्तानी कारगिल में तो कोई उन्हें नहीं मार पाया, लेकिन कारगिल से लौटते ही 1 महीने के अंदर हमारे यहाँ के सड़े गले सिस्टम ने उन्हें मार डाला, क्योंकि उन्हें ऑन ड्यूटी इंडो चाइना बॉर्डर पर किसी काम पर भेजा गया था। जो जोंगा उनको फौजी जोंगा दी गई थी, वो इस लायक नहीं है कि लेह तांग से जैसी रोड पर वो चल सके। लेकिन फौजियों को अच्छी गाड़ियां तो तब मिलेंगी जब ढंग के जूते मिल जाए कारगिल युद्ध में लड़ने के लिए। जूते तो ढंग के मिले नहीं थे, गाड़ियां अच्छी कहां से मिलेंगी? तो जैसी गाड़ी उन्हें मिली थी उसका नतीजा ये था कि गाड़ी के उस रास्ते पे ब्रेक्स फेल हुए। पहले भी बहुत बार उस जंगा के ब्रेक्स फेल हो चुके थे। वो गाड़ी इस लायक ही नहीं थी कि उनको ऑन ड्यूटी दी जाए, फिर भी दी गई। वो फिर से खराब हुई, खाई में गिरी और वो खत्म हो गए। जब वो अपनी ड्यूटी पर जा रहे थे तो उनको आर्मी की तरफ से फैमिली को साथ ले जाना सैंक्शन हुआ था, क्योंकि वहां पर पेंगोंगसो है। कोई ऑफिसर अगर ऑन ड्यूटी जाता है तो साथ में अपनी फैमिली को लेकर जा सकता है। पेंगोंगसो की वजह से मैं उनके साथ थी, मेरी आंख के सामने मरे हो, मेरे पैर के 2 टुकड़े हो गए थे। पर क्या मैं यहाँ इंडियन सिस्टम ऐसा है कि क्या मैं आर्मी को सू कर सकती हूँ उस गाड़ी के लिए? नहीं कर सकती। मैं ये प्रूव भी नहीं कर सकती हूँ कि उस गाड़ी की वजह से मेरी जिंदगी बदल गई। एनीवेज, ये यहाँ का सिस्टम है। अगर मैं अमेरिका में होती, आई वुड हैव सूड द आर्मी।